Hello music listeners, underground enthusiasts, and people who use Soundgodizer. We're back with another review, another EP review actually. This time we are talking about Please, the 8th project from singer-songwriter-producer Skele, an alternative rock and emo artist that has been seeing pretty consistent growth over the past few years. And I can't say that my attention given to Skele has always been at a high. It's kind of been up and down over the years, listening to a couple songs on and off whenever I just notice that they've been released or they just appear on my timeline somewhat. But I do like what I've heard from Skele so far. And going into Please, I didn't really expect anything. Not to say that I expected it to be bad or sort of a non-starter, I just didn't really know what I would get going into it. And coming out of it, I feel like I was left with a lot. So we're going to talk about it because I thought it was really interesting. The EP starts off with Sermon, whose production is provided by AC and is pretty plucky and straightforward, with the sharp acoustic guitar taking up most of the instrumental, occasionally broken up by these ambient and soft keys. And Skele's main vocals are also pretty straightforward, delivering emotional ballad singing that's enunciated enough to understand what's being said, but with a certain dulcet tone to sort of take the edge off a bit to properly translate the emotion of what's being said in the lyrics. And on the topic of lyrics, their analogous nature creates a lot of really interesting imagery, with metaphors of religion and masochism going hand in hand to describe what I can only imagine to be a sometimes endearing but otherwise tumultuous relationship, where Skele is lucidly aware of the problematic aspects of painful devotion to someone, but also taking pleasure with a certain level of pride in said dedication, with lyrics like "Let me feel you ripping up my skin, I'm a masochist at best," reinforcing the idea of pleasure and pain and their dynamic of the relationship. And on the technical side of things, the mixing and vocals are pretty great, with the deep reverb and layered chanting delivery further reinforcing the metaphors of religion, because this crowd of layered vocals kind of sounds like a church hymn. And the reverb is almost too much. It kind of sits right at the edge of overwhelming, but it does really instill that harmonious choir sound, and despite being a lot, doesn't go over that edge entirely. Sermon's a good start to the album, and it doesn't ask too much of you, and is a pretty vulnerable and exposing perspective on Skele's emotional state here. And then we have the second track, Pain, which is a Fatsy and Anxiety Intact produced beat, where we get a much more engaging and complex instrumental, retaining the folk sound of Sermon while adding other elements of alternative emo and emo rap. And it is in Pain that a growing theme is introduced. The concept and dynamic of pleasure versus pain is expanded upon, with Skele actively asking for pain from this romantic partner, detailing all of the things this person does that are generally pretty rough, like a version of recognizing the pain that this person is causing, biting through Skele's neck like a vampire, and deception and lies, and all of these negative attributes. And Skele's desperate tone paired with these lyrics of submission give Pain the space to be a pretty impactful song at the end of the day. And then compared to Sermon, the vocal melodies and flows are a little more dynamic, with sharp delivery at some points and then soft, extended notes at other times. But on Sermon, that variety wasn't really necessary. On Pain, it makes much more sense to bump up the tonal variety to shift to a more energetic display of emotion. However, the same heavy reverb and insanely deep ambience still lies in the beat, and I appreciate that with the lyrical themes, some mixing choices also become themes themselves to reinforce what's being said on the musical and tonal side of things. Moving on to Home, we see AC back in the driver's seat for production, following up on the somber acoustic guitar of Sermon with twangy and mellow notes paired with some droning and dark ambience that isn't too dissimilar to the angelic and spacey notes that we heard on Sermon. And although I do appreciate consistency, I do feel like some of the tones blend together a little bit, but if I'm honest, that's kind of being nitpicking, because in terms of concept, Home takes a turn away from the self-destructive motives of Sermon and Pain to dive into topics of self-identity, introspection, and we see Skele turn the blade away from himself and pointing it at this person that has caused him the pain we've heard described so far on the project, with lyrics detailing a descent into madness and losing a sense of self, culminating into this sort of reveal that this romantic partner has been having sexual relationships with other men, which sort of further causes the identity crisis that we see going on, with Skele sort of questioning what can this other person provide that he cannot. And honestly, I think this song is gorgeous. Like, it does an amazing job at bringing previously introduced concepts to life, connecting the dots between much of the lyrical concepts we've heard so far. And it's especially interesting considering Home was dropped as a single, but despite it being detached in that regard, it fits beautifully into the overall narrative of the project. And Skele's vocal delivery and tone on this is top notch. The "he just killed a man" line is delivered with such conviction and melancholy, and the repeated "look at what you've done to me" is so heart-wrenching that you can't help but be invested in this relationship that is being described to us here. And then aside sees Jost on the production, with this elegant guitar loop almost being overtaken by the punchy snares and booming bass. But even with this aggressive percussion, the melodies of the piano and the guitar break through when necessary. And I think that this track gives us Skele's most impassioned delivery of the entire EP, where his high notes and energetic yet soft timbre delivers this clarion call of forgiveness and understanding. And the mix supports Skele's cries and is incredibly complimentary to the shift away from the tired and weary vocals over to this spark of intensity, creating what is probably my favorite vocal performance on the project. And then the EP ends with Cold, a self-produced, heavy and resounding piano ballad that sees the conclusion to the events of what we've heard detailed over the course of the project. And with this being the end to the project, it also seems to be the apparent end for the relationship that's been chronicled over the course of Please. And to put it bluntly, this song is beautiful. Skele's mix of reluctant acceptance of someone being gone with the denial that they won't be back is kind of crushing in a way. You know, saying you can pin me up against the wall, do all of these things if it would make you come back. And the strings that close out this track are grandiose and serve as the final peak of emotion as the album slowly fades to a close. And out of all of the songs on the EP, even if the lyrics on Cold don't match the harrowing metaphors and similes of the previous tracks, it still feels the most personal. Skele has stripped away the luxuries of complex instrumentals and fantastic analogies to just be upfront and honest, giving one last cry before the fire fades out into the cold. I really wasn't sure how I was going to feel going into this album, but after giving it the attention it deserves, I've kind of realized how cohesive and vulnerable it is. It truly does feel like a self-exposé in a way. With such vivid descriptions of toxicity and desperation, it almost kind of feels wrong to listen to it, like I'm peering into Skele's darkest emotions uninvited. But this was an invitation, and it pays off by being one of the darkest and most dreadful depictions of someone's mental state that I've seen in a long time. While maintaining a level of narrative and cohesiveness across each song, it really stands out a lot to me. And in terms of tonality and production and technical qualities, I really do enjoy the singing, and I really enjoy the production a lot. The only thing that I can say was kind of out of left field for me, or I feel like didn't quite fit, was on Cold, where the pitch correction and the processed mix of Skele's vocals kind of pulls me away from the super loud and dusty and reverby piano. I guess maybe hearing a more natural or organic mix on that track for Skele's vocals might help them blend a bit better with the sounds of the production, but like I said earlier with the consistency and themes, that's kind of just nitpicking, because even in the context of the song, the mix works well. Overall, I really like this project. You know, if you like, you know, emotional, sad ballads, if you like very vulnerable and relatable stories of relationships and self-identity and related crises, then I think that you would really get a lot out of this EP. It feels very personal, and none of it feels like it's being played up or fictionalized for the sake of music production. So yeah, that's about it. I really enjoyed it. Go check it out, Please, by Skele. I don't know, more reviews soon. Bye.